In the late 10th century, a group of Turkic nomads camped along the lower Sirdarya in what is now southern Kazakhstan and northwestern Uzbekistan, converted to Islam and took service as auxiliaries for whichever local power would hire them. They had no territory, no cities, and no standing in the settled world. Within 70 years, their descendants controlled Iran, held the Caliph in Baghdad under their protection, and had smashed the Byzantine army so completely that Anatolia began turning Turkish. The dynasty was named after a chieftain called Seljuk, and its rise is the clearest demonstration in history of how quickly the balance between the steppe and the settled world could shift. The origins are documented only in outline. The Seljuks belonged to the Oghuz Turkic Confederation, which occupied the steppe north and east of the Aral Sea. Their eponymous ancestor, Seljuk, is recorded as a commander who broke with the Oghuz leadership, moved his following south toward the Sirdarya frontier around the town of Jand, and adopted Islam. The date is usually placed in the late 10th century. For the next several decades, his sons and grandsons operated as a mobile military force in the borderlands between the Karakhanid and Ghaznavid states, hiring themselves out, changing sides, and being alternately employed and expelled. This was an unstable and dangerous existence, and it also produced a body of experienced cavalry with no attachment to any settled authority. The move that changed everything was into Khurasan. By the 1030s, Seljuk groups were crossing the Amu Darya into the rich northeastern Iranian province of Khurasan, then held by the Ghaznavids. The Ghaznavid ruler Masud I attempted to expel them and could not. The mobility of the Turkmen horsemen, their willingness to disperse and reconcentrate, and their ability to live off the country made them almost impossible to bring to a decisive battle on terms favorable to a conventional army. On 23 May 1040, at Dandanakan near Merv, the two forces finally met. The Ghaznavid army had marched through waterless country and arrived exhausted. The Seljuks controlled the wells. The Ghaznavid army disintegrated. Khurasan was lost, and the Ghaznavid Empire was permanently reduced to Afghanistan and the Punjab. Tugril Beg, grandson of Seljuk, was proclaimed ruler. What followed was rapid. The Seljuks took the Anatolian plateau over the following decade. In 1055, Tugril entered Baghdad. The Abbasid Caliph, who had for a century been under the control of a Shia dynasty from northern Iran, was in a difficult position, and Tugril presented himself as a Sunni deliverer. The Caliph granted him the title of Sultan and formal authority over the temporal government of the Islamic East. That arrangement defined the political structure of the region for centuries, a caliph holding religious legitimacy but no armies, and a Turkic sultan holding the armies and governing in the caliph's name. Every subsequent Sunni dynasty in the region operated on some version of it. Tugril died in 1063 and was succeeded by his nephew Alp Arslan, whose reign produced the most consequential single event of the whole sequence. On 26 August 1071, near Manzikert in eastern Anatolia, Alp Arslan met a large Byzantine army under the Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. The Byzantine force was defeated, and the emperor was captured, which had happened to no Byzantine emperor for centuries. Alp Arslan released him on terms. The immediate territorial loss was limited. The lasting consequence was that the Byzantine state collapsed into civil war over the succession. The defensive system in Anatolia disintegrated, and Turkic groups moved into the interior over the following decades, essentially unopposed. Anatolia, Greek-speaking and Christian for a millennium, began the long process of becoming Turkish and Muslim. The appeals that the Byzantine emperors subsequently sent west for military assistance were among the factors that produced the First Crusade in 1095. Alp Arslan was killed in 1072 while on campaign in Transoxiana. His son Malik Shah ruled until 1092, and this period is generally regarded as the height of Seljuk power. The empire extended from Anatolia and Syria to the frontiers of Central Asia. The administration of that empire was run for 20 years by one of the most capable officials of the medieval world. Nizam al-Mulk was a Persian bureaucrat from Khurasan who served as vizier under both Alp Arslan and Malik Shah. He built the administrative structure that allowed a Turkic military elite to govern a vast settled empire, and two of his measures had effects that outlasted the dynasty by centuries. The first was the systematic development of the ikta, an arrangement under which a commander was assigned the revenue of a district in return for maintaining troops. This solved the problem of paying a large army in a cash-poor economy, and variants of it were used across the Islamic world for the next 800 years. The second was the madrasa. Nizam al-Mulk founded a network of state-funded colleges across the empire, the Nizamiya, of which the most famous was established in Baghdad in 1067. These institutions trained the judges, jurists, and administrators the state needed, taught a defined Sunni curriculum, and provided salaried positions for scholars. The theologian al-Ghazali taught at the Baghdad Nizamiya. The madrasa, as a formal endowed institution, spread across the Islamic world from this model. Nizam al-Mulk also wrote a book. The Siyasat-Nama, or Book of Government, sets out in plain terms how a state should be run, how to select officials, how to run an intelligence service, how to handle petitions, how to manage the army, and what happens when a ruler stops paying attention. It survives and is read as one of the most practical works of political administration produced anywhere in the medieval period. He was assassinated in 922. Malik Shah died within months of him, and the empire immediately began to fragment among competing members of the family. The pattern is by now familiar in Central Asian history. Sovereignty was understood to belong to the ruling family collectively. Territories were distributed among its members, and every adult male had both a claim and the resources to press it. The unified Seljuk Empire effectively ended within a few years of Malik Shah's death, though branches continued in Anatolia, where the Seljuks of Rum ruled from Konya until the 13th century, in Kirman, in Syria, and in the east, where Sultan Sanjar held Khurasan until 1157. The relationship between the Seljuk rulers and the tribal Turkmen who had brought them to power was more difficult than the narrative of conquest suggests, and it became one of the structural problems of the empire. The nomads who crossed into Khurasan wanted pasture, plunder, and freedom of movement. The sultans, once established, wanted taxable agriculture, functioning cities, and settled order. These aims are not compatible. The Seljuk solution was to direct the tribal groups outward toward the Byzantine frontier in the west, where their raiding served the state's expansion instead of damaging its revenue base. Anatolia became Turkish partly because the sultans in Iran had good reasons to send the Turkmen there. The religious dimension of Seljuk rule was equally deliberate. The dynasty presented itself as the restorer of Sunni authority at a moment when much of the Islamic world was under Shia rule, with the Fatimids in Egypt and, until 1055, the Buyids in Baghdad. The madrasa network was part of that program, producing trained personnel committed to a defined doctrinal position. The Seljuks also faced a determined internal opponent in the Nizari Ismailis, who operated from mountain fortresses in Iran and used targeted assassination on senior officials.
Nizam al-Mulk's own death in 922 is attributed in most sources to that campaign. The evidence for the empire's cultural investment is still visible on the ground. Seljuk architecture in Iran established forms that became standard across the region: the 4-Iwan courtyard plan, the monumental portal, the double-shelled dome, and the use of decorative brickwork and stucco carried to a very high level of refinement. The Great Mosque of Isfahan preserves domes built under Seljuk patronage in the 1080s that are studied by architectural historians as structural achievements in their own right. Along the routes, brick minarets and caravanserais of the same period survive across Iran and Central Asia, and the tomb tower tradition of northern Iran belongs to the same building culture. Sanjar's reign ended in a way that closes the circle. In 1141, he was defeated at Katwan near Samarkand by the Karachitai, a non-Muslim people driven west out of northern China. In 1153, he was captured by Oghuz Turkmen tribesmen, the same broad group his own ancestors had come from, and held prisoner for 3 years. He died in 1157, and the Seljuk presence in the east ended with him. The cultural output of the period was substantial. Seljuk patronage supported the mathematician and poet Omar Khayyam, who was commissioned to reform the calendar and produced the Jalali calendar, whose accuracy in measuring the length of the year compares favorably with the Gregorian calendar introduced in Europe 5 centuries later. Seljuk architecture in Iran established the 4-Iwan mosque plan and produced the Great Mosque of Isfahan, whose brick domes are among the finest structures of the period. The whole sequence took 70 years, from a landless clan on the Sir Darya frontier to the dominant power of the Islamic world. It was made possible by mobile cavalry, by the collapse of the states that stood in the way, and by an administrative class that knew how to run an empire and was willing to protect whoever could protect it. History isn't just the past, it's the record of how the present came to be. Comment below with the dynasty or period of Central Asian history you would like covered next. If this kind of documented, source-based history speaks to you, consider liking and subscribing so more of it can reach you. This video uses AI-generated audio and visuals for educational purposes only.